Have you ever considered that the most famous story about a global flood might not actually be about the water at all? We see the pictures in children's books, the pairs of giraffes and lions looking out from a wooden boat. We hear the tale of a great rain and an old man who saved the animal kingdom. But what if this epic narrative is a vessel itself, carrying a message far deeper and more relevant to our lives today than we could ever imagine? What if the story of Noah's Ark is really a story about us? To truly understand the Ark, we must first understand the world that necessitated its creation. The book of Genesis paints a stark picture, a world teeming with humanity but spiritually empty. It describes a time when the thoughts and inclinations of the human heart were only evil all the time. This was not a world of minor mistakes or occasional bad days. It was a civilization that had fundamentally lost its way, where corruption and violence were not the exception but the norm. God's heart, the narrative tells us, was filled with pain, a deep grief over the state of his own creation. Amidst this pervasive darkness, there was a single point of light: a man named Noah. The scriptures describe him in three very specific ways. He was a righteous man, he was blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. This was not a description of perfection, but of direction. In a world walking away from its creator, Noah was walking towards him. His righteousness was not self-righteousness, but a deep relational alignment with the divine will, a commitment to goodness in an age that had forgotten what goodness looked like. It was in this context that God spoke to Noah, delivering a message that was both terrifying and salvific. He revealed his plan to bring a flood of waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. A divine reset. But for Noah, there was a path to safety. He was given a set of instructions, a blueprint for an ark. This was not a suggestion or a request. It was a command that would test the very limits of his faith, his endurance, and his sanity. The mission was clear: build a massive vessel to save his family and pairs of every living creature. The sheer scale of the task is difficult to comprehend. The ark's dimensions, given in cubits, translate to a vessel of immense proportions, roughly 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. A three-story floating sanctuary made entirely of gopher wood. This was not a weekend project. Scholars estimate it would have taken Noah decades, perhaps as long as a century, to complete this monumental structure. It required deforestation, engineering, and back-breaking labor, all fueled by a promise of a rain that had never been seen before in a world that likely mocked him endlessly. Imagine the scene. For years, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, toiled under the sun. The rhythmic sound of hammers and saws would have been a constant presence, a strange symphony in a world deaf to God's warnings. Their neighbors would have watched, scoffed, and ridiculed. They called him a fool, a madman building a boat in the middle of dry land. Yet Noah's faith did not waver. Every plank he laid, every joint he sealed with pitch, was an act of worship, a testament to his unwavering trust in the word of God over the wisdom of the world. The instructions were meticulous. The ark was to have lower, middle, and upper decks, with a roof and a door in the side. The word for pitch, the waterproof sealant, is closely related to the Hebrew word for atonement or covering. The ark was not just a physical shelter. It was a symbol of God's covering, his protection over those who trusted in him. Every detail mattered, not just for structural integrity, but for the theological weight it carried. Noah did everything just as God commanded him, a simple phrase that encapsulates a lifetime of faithful obedience. Then came the second part of the mission, perhaps even more miraculous than the first. The gathering of the animals. This was not a frantic chase through the wilderness. The scripture says the animals, two of every kind, male and female, came to Noah to be kept alive. It was a divine summons. Imagine the procession: elephants and eagles, lizards and lions, creeping things and soaring birds, all moving in a great, peaceful migration toward the ark. A supernatural event that would have silenced even the most hardened skeptics, yet the world remained blind. God also made a distinction between clean and unclean animals, instructing Noah to take 7 pairs of the clean animals. This detail points forward, foreshadowing a system of worship and sacrifice that would be established after the flood. It shows that God was not just planning for survival, but for the restoration of a right relationship with humanity. The ark was not just a zoo, it was a sanctuary, a floating temple carrying the seeds of a new world, a world where worship and reverence for God would be central once again. The day finally arrived when the last animal had boarded and Noah's family, 8 souls in total, stepped across the threshold. The door of the ark, so long open as an invitation, was shut. And it was not Noah who shut it. The Bible says, "The Lord shut him in." This is a profoundly significant detail. It speaks of a finality, a point of no return. But it also speaks of God's personal care and protection. The ones who were inside were sealed in by divine grace, safe from the judgment that was about to unfold upon the world. For 7 days, they waited in the belly of the great vessel. A week of silence, of anticipation, of finality. The world outside continued as it always had, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, completely oblivious to the impending cataclysm. Then the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. The rain began, a relentless torrent that would continue for 40 days and 40 nights. The water rose, lifting the ark from its foundations, turning it from a static monument of faith into a vessel of hope upon the waters of chaos. The experience inside the ark must have been overwhelming. The constant drumming of the rain, the groaning of the massive timbers, the sounds and smells of countless animals. They were tossed on a shoreless ocean, in complete darkness save for the light from a single window at the top. It was a world reduced to one family, one boat, and one promise. Their survival depended entirely on the structural integrity of their obedience and the faithfulness of the God who had commanded them to build. This was a crucible of faith, a long, dark trial designed to forge a new humanity. For 150 days the waters prevailed, covering the highest mountains. All life on earth was wiped out. It is a harsh and sobering part of the story, one that speaks to the profound seriousness of sin and the reality of divine judgment. Yet even in this act of decreation, the focus remains on the ark, the symbol of God's preservation. While the world outside was being unmade, the world inside, the seed of the new creation, was being kept safe, floating above the destruction, held securely in the hand of God. But God, the narrative emphasizes, remembered Noah. In the midst of the chaos, the Creator had not forgotten the faithful few. He sent a wind to sweep over the earth, and the waters began to recede. The journey was far from over, but the tide had turned. The slow, gradual process of the waters abating was as much a part of the story as their rapid rising. It was a time of waiting, of patience, of trusting that the God who had initiated the flood was now bringing it to a peaceful conclusion. After many months, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The view from the window had changed from endless water to the peak of a mountain. Hope was on the horizon. Still Noah waited. He did not rush out. He sent out a raven, a rugged bird that could survive on carrion, which flew back and forth until the waters had dried up. It was a sign of the world's state, still in a process of cleansing, not yet ready for new life to begin. Then Noah sent out a dove. The first time it returned, finding no place to rest its foot. The earth was not yet habitable. A week later, he sent it out again. This time, it returned in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak. This single leaf was a world of information. It was a sign of life, of new growth, of peace. The olive branch has remained a symbol of peace ever since, a direct echo from this moment of profound hope and relief from within the ark. After a final week, Noah sent the dove out once more, and this time it did not return. The world was ready. The long confinement was over. After more than a year sealed inside the ark, God spoke again. "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives." They opened the great door and stepped out, not into the old world, but into a new one. A world washed clean, silent and pristine, ready for a new beginning. The first thing Noah did upon setting foot on dry ground was build an altar to the Lord. His first act in the new world was one of worship, of gratitude. He offered burnt offerings from the clean animals he had saved, an act of thanksgiving for their preservation. The aroma, the scripture says, was pleasing to the Lord. It was in this moment of pure worship that God made a promise, a covenant not just with Noah, but with all of creation. God vowed in his heart that he would never again curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. He would never again destroy all living creatures as he had done. As long as the earth endures, he promised, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. This was a promise of stability, of rhythm, of a dependable world where life could flourish once more under his divine care. And to seal this everlasting covenant, God set his bow in the clouds. The rainbow, a beautiful arc of light appearing after a storm, was repurposed. It became a divine sign, a visible reminder of God's promise. It was not a sign for humanity to look at and remember, but a sign for God himself to see and remember his covenant of mercy. Every rainbow is a message of hope, a callback to that first promise made on a cleansed earth, a declaration that mercy will always triumph over judgment. So when we say the story is more than just about a flood, this is where we begin to see why. The flood itself is the backdrop, the setting for a much deeper drama. The ark is more than a boat, it is a symbol of salvation. In a world drowning in sin and chaos, God provided a means of escape, a refuge built on faith and obedience. The ark is a picture of God's grace, an offer of safety available to all who would enter through the one door before it was too late. The water of the flood carries its own profound symbolism. It is an agent of both judgment and cleansing. Just as the world was washed clean of its corruption, the waters of baptism in the Christian faith symbolize a washing away of sin, a death to the old self, and a rebirth into a new life. The flood is a macrocosm of what happens in the heart of every believer who chooses to enter into a new covenant with God. It is the end of one life and the beginning of another. Noah himself serves as a powerful archetype. He is a model of unwavering faith in the face of a skeptical world. He represents the call to be in the world but not of it, to live a life of righteousness and obedience, even when it makes no sense to those around us. His story teaches us that one person, walking faithfully with God, can be used to preserve life and become an agent of renewal for the entire world. His perseverance through decades of construction and a year of confinement is a testament to the strength that comes from divine purpose. The story of the ark is also a profound lesson in God's character. We see his justice and his holiness, which cannot tolerate pervasive and unrepentant sin. But we see his justice perfectly balanced with his immense mercy and love. He grieves over the state of the world and takes no pleasure in its destruction. His ultimate desire is not to condemn, but to save, to preserve a remnant, and to establish a new covenant based on promise and grace. The ark is a vessel of mercy floating on an ocean of judgment. The covenant with the rainbow is the story's ultimate punchline. It is a declaration that despite humanity's failings, which God acknowledges will continue, his response will no longer be one of universal destruction, but of enduring patience and grace. The rainbow is a promise that God has bound himself to his creation in a relationship of faithfulness. It transforms a symbol of the storm, the rain, into a symbol of the promise that follows the storm. It is a message that hope and new beginnings are woven into the fabric of creation. Now let's build the bridge from this ancient story to our lives right here, right now. How often do we feel like we are living in a world that has lost its way, a world filled with the noise of corruption, violence, and despair? In these moments, we can feel overwhelmed, as if a flood of negativity is rising all around us. The story of Noah reminds us that even in the darkest of times, it is possible to walk faithfully with God, to be a point of light. Each of us is called to build an ark in our own lives. This ark is not made of gopher wood, but of faith, prayer, and righteous living. It is the sanctuary we build in our hearts and in our homes, a place where we and our families can find refuge from the storms of the world. It is a commitment to tune out the mockery of skepticism and tune in to the quiet instructions of God. Building this ark requires daily labor, the consistent choice to live according to a divine blueprint rather than the world's shifting values. The animals coming to Noah represent a divine order and peace that is possible when we are aligned with God's will. In our lives, this can be seen as the people and blessings that God brings into our sphere of influence when we are faithful. When we build a place of spiritual safety and refuge, we often find that God draws others to it. Our personal ark becomes a source of life and hope not just for ourselves, but for those around us who are seeking shelter from the storm. The act of the Lord shutting the door is a powerful metaphor for our own security and faith. There comes a point where our trust in God seals us in His grace. The storms of life may rage outside, the chaos may be immense, but inside that covenant relationship, we are secure. It does not mean we will not be tossed about or that the journey will be easy, but it means we will be safe. It is a reminder that our ultimate security does not depend on our own strength, but on the faithfulness of the one who has enclosed us in his care. We all experience periods of waiting in the dark, much like Noah's family inside the ark. These are the times of trial, uncertainty, and confinement where we cannot see the shore. It is in these moments that the story of Noah encourages us to be patient, to trust the process, and to keep watch for signs of hope. The olive leaf is a promise that even after the most devastating storms, new life is possible. We must learn to send out our own doves of hope and watch for the evidence of God's restoring work in our lives. Emerging from the ark into a new world is a picture of resurrection and transformation. Every time we pass through a significant trial with our faith intact, we emerge changed. We step out onto new ground, with a new perspective and a deeper gratitude for the simple act of living. And like Noah, our first response should be one of worship. Gratitude for the deliverance, for the preservation, for the chance to begin again, is the foundation upon which a new life should be built. The rainbow is God's personal promise to you. When you feel beaten down by the storms of life, when you see the clouds gathering, look for the rainbow. See it not just as a meteorological phenomenon, but as a personal message from the Creator of the universe. It is a sign that the storm will pass. It is a reminder that God has made a covenant of peace and will not abandon you. It is a symbol of hope painted across the sky, a declaration that mercy is the final word. Furthermore, the story challenges our modern sensibilities about justice and mercy. It forces us to grapple with the consequences of human actions and the reality of a holy God. But it ultimately resolves in a flood of grace. The story does not end with destruction, it ends with a promise. It shows that God's plan is always redemptive. He is always working to bring a new creation out of the wreckage of the old, to offer a covenant of hope to a world that desperately needs it. The ark also serves as a powerful call to environmental stewardship. Noah was tasked with preserving the biodiversity of the planet. It was a sacred trust, a mission to protect and care for every living creature. In a world facing ecological challenges, this ancient story speaks with a fresh urgency. It reminds us that creation is a gift, and we, like Noah, have a responsibility to be faithful caretakers of the earth and all the life it contains, ensuring its survival for future generations. The narrative teaches a vital lesson about minority faith. Noah and his family were a tiny fraction of the global population. They were the ultimate contrarians, living a life completely opposed to the cultural currents of their time. Their story is an encouragement to anyone who feels alone in their beliefs or their commitment to a higher standard of morality. It validates the path of faithfulness, proving that it is better to be in the minority with God than in the majority against Him. Consider the patience of Noah. The decades of building, the year on the water, the months of waiting for the land to dry. His entire life was a marathon of faithfulness, not a sprint. In our culture of instant gratification, Noah's journey is a sobering reminder that true spiritual growth and fulfilling God's purpose often requires a lifetime of patient, persistent obedience. The greatest works are not built in a day, and the most profound journeys involve long periods of simply waiting on God's timing. The single door of the ark is a profound theological symbol. There was only one way in, one path to safety. For Christians, this points directly to Jesus, who said, "I am the way and the truth and the life, and I am the door." The ark becomes a physical representation of a spiritual truth, that salvation is a specific provision from God, an invitation to enter into a refuge He has prepared. It is a universal offer, but it requires a personal decision to step through that one door. The story also contains a warning about the danger of spiritual complacency. The people in Noah's day were not actively shaking their fists at God. They were simply preoccupied with their own lives. They were eating, drinking, and marrying, completely unaware of the spiritual reality around them. It is a caution against living a life so focused on the mundane that we miss the divine invitations and warnings that are all around us, a call to remain spiritually awake and prepared. The family unit is central to the story of salvation. God saved Noah, but he also saved his entire household. This emphasizes the importance of family in the spiritual journey, the power of a faithful leader to create a legacy of faith that protects and provides for the next generation. The ark was a family project, and it became a family sanctuary. It reminds us of our responsibility to build a spiritual heritage within our own homes, creating a safe place for our loved ones to weather life's storms. Ultimately, the ark floating on the waters of chaos is a picture of order triumphing over disorder, of life prevailing over death, of God's divine plan riding securely above the turmoil of the world. It is an image of hope for every generation. It tells us that no matter how chaotic the world becomes, no matter how high the floodwaters of evil and despair may rise, God has a plan and a provision for those who place their trust in Him. He will carry them safely through the storm to the shores of a new beginning. So the story of Noah's Ark is far more than a simple tale of a flood. It is a multi-layered narrative about judgment and mercy, about faith and obedience, about decreation and new creation. It is a story that reveals the heart of God, a heart that grieves over sin but rejoices in redemption. It is a story filled with symbolism that continues to resonate with profound spiritual truth thousands of years later, speaking to the deepest parts of the human experience. In our own lives, we will face personal floods, the loss of a job, a health crisis, a broken relationship, a crisis of faith. These are the moments when the waters rise and threaten to overwhelm us. The story of Noah asks us a critical question. What is your ark? Where do you place your trust when the storms come? Have you built a life of faith and obedience that can withstand the deluge, a spiritual refuge sealed by the promises of God? The narrative is not just an ancient account, it is a timeless invitation. An invitation to step out of the spiritually numb crowd and become a Noah in our generation, a person who walks faithfully with God despite the culture. An invitation to enter the ark of His grace before the storms come. An invitation to trust that even after the most devastating flood, God's promise of a new morning, sealed with a rainbow, still holds true. The people of Noah's time missed their chance because they could not see beyond their immediate reality. They saw a man building a boat on dry land and called it foolishness. They failed to see it for what it truly was, an ark of salvation, an act of God's incredible, merciful love, offering a way out. Let us not make the same mistake. Let us learn to see the world with spiritual eyes, recognizing God's invitations and provisions even when they seem strange or countercultural. The story of Noah is an epic of survival, but it is ultimately a prelude to a greater story of salvation. It sets the stage for a God who continually makes covenants with His people, a God who will one day provide a final and ultimate ark of salvation not made with human hands. It is a foundational piece of a much larger puzzle, revealing the consistent character of God throughout history, just, merciful, and always working to redeem His creation. When you look at the world today, with all its turmoil and uncertainty, it can be easy to despair. But the story of Noah offers a different perspective. It suggests that God is always preserving a remnant, always working through faithful individuals, and always has a plan for renewal. It gives us a reason to be hopeful, a reason to persevere, and a reason to believe that even the greatest storms are subject to His sovereign power and redemptive purpose. Think about the legacy of Noah. After the flood, all of humanity descended from his three sons. His faithfulness had global and historical consequences. This reminds us that our personal choices, Our quiet acts of obedience and faith can have a ripple effect that we may never fully comprehend. By choosing to build our ark, we are not just saving ourselves, we are contributing to the preservation of faith and hope for generations to come. The ark resting on the mountain is a picture of peace after chaos. It's the destination of every faith journey. We may be tossed on the waters for a season, but the promise is that we will eventually come to rest on solid ground, on the high place of God's faithfulness. The journey through the flood is not the end. It is the means to an end, a purification process that leads to a higher, more secure resting place. So the next time you hear the story of Noah, look past the cartoon animals and the bathtub-shaped boat. See it for what it is, a profound narrative about the human condition and the divine response. A story of a world that lost its way, a man who found his, and a God who provided a way through the storm. See the wood, the pitch, the single door, and the waiting family not just as historical details, but as symbols for your own spiritual journey. The story of Noah's Ark is not just a record of what God once did. It is a promise of what he continues to do. He continues to provide a refuge for those who trust him. He continues to see us through the floods of life. And he continues to place his rainbow in the clouds as a personal guarantee of his love and faithfulness. The flood was a historical event, but the ark is an eternal truth. Therefore, let the enduring lesson of Noah's Ark not be the fear of a coming flood, but the profound hope in a providing God. Let it be a call to live a life of such unwavering faith that we, too, can be a vessel of hope in a world adrift. Let it be a reminder that no matter how dark the storm, the olive leaf of new life will appear, and the rainbow of God's promise will always, always follow the rain. The greatest truth is this: the ark saved Noah from the water, but the covenant he made with God on the other side saved his future. The story isn't about surviving the judgment. It's about what you do with the grace you are given afterward. It's about building an altar on your new ground. It is about living a life of gratitude, sealed by the promise of the rainbow, walking forward into a new world under the watchfulness of a merciful God. Let the echo of this ancient story shape your perspective today. Look for the modern arks, the places of spiritual safety God provides. Listen for his instructions, even when they seem strange to the world around you. And above all, when the storms of life inevitably come, remember the promise in the clouds. The story of Noah is not just about a boat. It's about a bond, a covenant between God and humanity that stands firm forever. The final, enduring message is one of incredible hope. Even when the world reaches its darkest point, when all seems lost, God is at work, preserving a future. The story of Noah is the ultimate testament to the fact that there is always a new beginning possible. It is a declaration that even out of the most catastrophic endings, God can and will bring forth new life, new hope, and a new covenant sealed with a promise of peace. So carry this one thought forward. The ark is a reminder that in every generation, in every life, God always provides a way to float above the chaos. Your ark is your faith, your obedience is its structure, and God's promise is the rainbow that guarantees you will reach the other side.